Good evening, everyone. I'm Father Tom Ray, Director of the Office of Evangelization and Catechesis. I've been introduced earlier in the afternoon to most of you. It's a great privilege and joy to welcome those of you who are joining us this evening for the keynote address. And it's a particular privilege to introduce our host in so many ways. Archbishop Dennis Schnurr is with us tonight. So let's welcome Archbishop here. I don't know how many of you have seen the recent advertisement on television for Under Armour, but it is quite the rage on YouTube these days. It's the great swimmer Michael Phelps practicing at all early hours of the morning, and the caption and the tagline of the commercial is, "What we do in the darkness will be seen in the light." And of course, then there is an equivalent commercial for the U.S. women's gymnastics team and the women's basketball teams, all of which we are reminded is that tagline is itself a direct citation from the Gospel of John. The works of darkness will be seen in the light. If there was ever a reminder to us of the power of athletics to speak to and engage and at times transform human experience, it is this professionalization of sports. St. Paul taught us that we look clearly and deeply into the secular culture and see there an invitation to evangelize the culture. And let us remember that human sports in human history and the professionalization of sports are nothing new in human history. We remember that St. John Chrysostom, Bishop of Constantinople in the 5th century, lamented that his people were going to the races and attending games during Holy Week. And at the far end of modern sports worshiping culture was the Third Reich in Germany, who well understood the transformative power of sports when they eliminated religion from their public school curriculum, replacing it with a sports pedagogy. But in spite of all these corruptions, we stand here tonight in the hope that we can and will continue to evangelize our culture through ministries like Sports Leader. Because at the heart of every sporting interaction is a human person, two natures. Therefore, every sporting event has two natures and is rightly ordered in our overall life. It's a great privilege to introduce, on behalf of Sports Leader, our host of the conference, Dr. Perez Santiago de Camino, the Holy Father's emissary. It's a pleasure to have you with us. He heads the Church and Sports section at the Pontifical Council of the Laity since April of 2013, and you've worked for 10 years in sports in Madrid, including training coaches and soccer players. And I'm told that your grandfather was part of the founding of a little soccer team there in Real Madrid. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. So please join with me and on behalf of Sports Leader and the Archdiocese in welcoming Dr. Santiago.
With your permission, Sovereign Lord in the Tabernacle. Good evening, everybody, Your Excellency, dear sport friends. I've been told that I have more or less 3 hours, right? I will speak I will speak low and slowly. So at the end of my speech, there will be no time for questions. So it will be easier for me. First of all, I would like to thank you for your presence today. First of all, thank Paul Pasafune and Yu for the invitation to participate in this first Sports Leader Director of Sports Ministry Conference. It's really an honor to me, for me to be here today, really. And I apologize in advance because my English is not as good as it would like to be, but I'm sure you will notice it, and I apologize for it. I will try to be brief and to explain what the functions and the purpose of the Church and Sports section are, and essentially what the Holy Father wants to develop in the field of sport through the Pontifical Council for the laity. And I would like to begin by the end of my talk. I came to this presentation with three main goals. The first is to congratulate you and to convey to you that the Holy Father is aware of the many efforts undertaken in the United States for the education and training in faith and values through sport. The second goal is to encourage you, because although in the United States, the United States is at a very advanced level in the field of sport values and sports ministry, much remains to be done. The United States, along with another English-speaking countries, is the locomotive of this apostolic mission, but we cannot stop at this point. You have to continue pushing up and open up new ways. I would like to encourage you to persevere with your work, notwithstanding the difficulties. The option of creating a position at school for a director of sport ministry is not necessary to form athletes in faith and virtues, but definitely helps to it. I would like to encourage you to reflect about the possibility as the next step to continue pushing up. And finally, I would like to say that I'm at your service. Feel free to contact me. The Church and Sports section is small and often cannot help to make large projects, especially because of low financial budget, but we think you can do many things when one gives it all his God. I left some visit cards at the end of the chapel, so feel free to contact me, even if you come to Rome for holidays or whatever. I will be very happy to hear from you and to know how is it going in the United States. First of all, I would like to explain the general structure of the Pontifical Council for the laity, because I know that the Roman Curia is not something that everybody knows very well, and how the Church and Sport section was created, so that you can better understand on what fields we are working and how we could help you with your work. So I know you have in your folders this small presentation that the Pontifical Council for the Laity is a dicastery, a ministry, a department of the Roman Curia that assists the Pope in all matters concerning the contribution made by the lay faithful to the life and mission of the Church. It's like a think tank for the Holy Father about the laity, and is divided in 4 sections. The women's section, which works to promote the Christian point of view of the woman in society. The youth section, which is the one, for example, that you may know because it's the one who organized the World Youth Day. The association and movement section, which is the one who takes care of the international lay associations and movements like, I don't know, the Neo-Catechumenal Way, Comunión y Liberación, or others. And then there's the church and sports section. So the head of the Pontifical Council for the Laity is Cardinal Rico, which is held by a secretary, German Bishop Joseph Clemens, and another secretary, and Spanish. If you see the picture in the first page of the presentation, there is the undersecretary with the jersey of Argentinian soccer player Messi, which plays in Barcelona Football Club. And I have to say, I'm not very happy about that. It was the undersecretary, so I had to put the picture in the presentation. Oh, by the way, it was my great-grandfather, the founder, or the first president of Real Madrid soccer team. So the first head of the church and sports section, in fact, was an American priest, Father Kevin Lexi. The section was created by direct desire of St. John Paul II in 2004, and I have to say that Father Lexi did a great job, because the sports section from the beginning is a really huge work to do. So there are 5 main roles of the church and sports section, which is be a point of reference in the church for national and international sport organizations. Also, another goal is to promote the importance of the pastoral ministry of sport environments, to foster a sport culture as means of bringing about the holistic growth of the person at the service of peace and brotherhood, and promote the study of specific issues relating to sport, particularly from the ethical point of view, and finally to organize and support initiatives that encourage the Christian witness by sportsmen. I can say one example. I was yesterday at Sacred Heart High School in Louisville, and I told them about this initiative we have done in Palestine and Israel. We organize a race which starts in Bethlehem and finishes in Jerusalem, and that's the only day in the year that Palestinians could enter into Jerusalem without doing the checkpoint. And around this race, we organize a congress and also team building projects with the kids. They play together, people from Israel and Palestine. So, or for example, we are in charge of all the international relations with the institutions and the sport institutions, like the International Olympic Committee, or the international federations of sports. We are also consultants on some organisms inside the United Nations, like the UNESCO or so. I will talk about that later, but also about the studies and research we do. We organize 4 international seminars in Rome, and we also collaborate with private foundations, sport foundations, to develop projects in third world countries. So I would like to go into deep into something that I mentioned, and that is that sport, understood correctly, is always a source of growth for human beings. Sport teaches people to live in dignity, to not lose sight of that, regardless of race, gender, religion, or ideology. We are all equal. The Catholic Church considers sports as a fundamental part of Christian life. God has made us people with a human soul and a human body. One individual is a person because of that, and the two of them are indivisible until death. So we can say that the body is sacred because it is the instrument that the Lord gives us to know Him and to love Him. Of all visible creatures, only man is homo capax Dei, capable of God, like St. Augustine said. Human beings, because of sin, have lost that perfection that God had given them. Therefore, they should strive to improve, to move closer to God in every situation of life. And the body, through work, sacrifice, pleasure, yes, also pleasure, because the senses are also God's creation and gives to us. Therefore, eating a good lobster or watching an NFL game, all this brings us closer to God. So we can say without fear that sport is one thing that pleases God when it is exercised righteously and then offered to Him as an act of love. While this may seem obvious, I consider it necessary to say because even in my house, still 3 years after I started my adventure in Rome, my friends and family were still wondering what was the relationship between the church and sport. Imagine what about the national or international ecclesiastical level, or even the athletes and the sportsmen. So the Holy See, as the institution of government of the church, has been interested in the sport practice from the beginning. It's well known by all the sports metaphors that St. Paul made to explain the Christian life to the Gentiles. Also, in the Middle Ages, we find great saints who valued sport as a means to reach God. In fact, St. Thomas Aquinas or St. Nicholas of Cusa made reference to the spiritual meaning contained in itself, the game. During the Renaissance and the Reform, a black legend is reported where the Catholic Church rejected the body as being sinful, but nothing is further from reality. In fact, we could quote thousands of messages, greetings, and speeches by the popes and the Church on sport. It is estimated that there are about 600 only since 1903. But it is evident that it's in the modern era, and more specifically from St. Pius X, the Holy See sought to pay special attention to sport not only as a mass communication medium, but also as a means of evangelization. Who knows, maybe without the support of St. Pius X, to the Baron of Coubertin, we wouldn't have the Olympics. I don't want to dwell on this point, but I would like to mention two popes in particular. The first one is Pius XII, who in his speech to an auditorium like this in 1952 explained the four main purposes of sport. Sport and gymnastics have as their immediate purposes that of the education, development, and strengthening the body in its constitution and power of movement. As their more remote purpose, you have the use made by the soul of the body so prepared for the development of the interior or exterior life of the person. As their still deeper purpose, that of contributing to its perfection. And lastly, there is the supreme purpose of a man. As man, the goal common to every form of humanity activity that bringing man closer to God. Pius XII saw clearly this close relationship between sport and God. This message can help us to examine our way of looking at sport and to see if we have a supernatural vision of it or not. However, if a pope stands above the rest for his personal love and passion for sports, I think probably is St. John Paul II. He was a man who knew how to combine sport even in very difficult situation of his life as an encounter with God through others and through nature. In his speech to the AC Milan soccer team in 1978, he said, "The Church, as you know, moreover, approves and encourages sport, seeing in it a form of gymnastics of the body and of the spirit, a training for social relations based on respect for others and for one's own person, and an element of social cohesion, which also fosters friendly relations in the international field. The dignity of sport rises to this height when it's inspired by healthy principles and excludes any excess of risk in the athlete and of disorderly passion in the public which become excited over sporting matters. Popes of the 21st century, St. John Paul II, Benedict XVI, and now Pope Francis have understood the enormous value of sports as means of evangelization in today's society. There are many occasions when, through their interventions, they invite us to approach the society toward the social marginalized, the peripheries, to find people who, even without knowing it, they thirst for faith, for God's love, and for forgiveness. This is what the Church and Sports section was created for. In short, the Papal Magisterium puts at the center of the sporting activity the human being on his way to personal perfection through a simultaneous conjunction of all human abilities, and places the person as a point of reference of unbeatable value and essential to all sport activities, and thus linking directly sport to the true identity of the human being. I would like to take this opportunity to say that if any of you understand Italian, I would like to recommend a book published last year by the Libreria Editrice Vaticana, the Vatican editor, entitled I Papi e lo Sport, the Popes and Sport. It's a gem of study, and I earn nothing by promoting it, so believe me. With these ideas, I dare to affirm that in this Christianized society, one of the pillars of the new evangelization is sport. Sport is a universal language understood everywhere, a mass media tool, reaching sometimes an overwhelming numbers of spectators. Think about the Super Bowl, the Olympics, the Soccer World Cup. Pope Francis, in his address to the soccer teams of Italy and Argentina, on the occasion of their visit to the Vatican, said, "You, dear players, are very popular. People follow you very closely, and not only on the field, but also off it. This is a social responsibility. Let me explain. During the game, when you are out on the pitch, you display beauty, generosity, and camaraderie. If a match lacks these qualities, it loses force, even if the team wins. If a man, and he added, the good you do is impressive with your conduct, the way you play, your values. You do good when people watch you. So take advantage of this to sow goodness. Even if you don't realize it, for many people who watch you with admiration, you are a role model for better or for worse. Be aware of this and be an example of loyalty, respect, and altruism. You are also builders of concord and social peace, of which are all in such a great need. You are a point of reference for many young people and a living model of real values. I have faith in all the good that you can among boys and girls." So nowadays society, especially in Western countries, is much more destructive than we think. We live in a world where the middle class is disappearing, and there is an exacerbated capitalism and culture and radical relativism alike, and are producing great social divisions in major cities and countries around the world. A materialistic and consumer lifestyle is widespread. If you are not worthy, you are nobody. And if you have, you need to continue consuming. It's a false happiness that doesn't satisfy. And what is more serious is that it is destructive, because it reduces people to objects. It comes to my mind when I was preparing this conference, this story that Pope Francis told about when he used to ask people in confession about how they live their mercy. And when he said, when people came to me to confession, I like to ask them, "Do you help people?" "Yes, Father, I give alms to the poor." And the Pope answered, "I see, and tell me, when you give alms, do you touch the hand of the person you are giving alms, or do you throw the money to them?" We are speaking of attitudes here. When you offer alms, do you look into their eyes, or do you look to the other way? We live in a dehumanizing society, and there's a lack of human warmth to the extreme. It's a society which allows us to meet people who live in the antipodes, but then we don't know the name of our neighbor who waits for the bus daily beside us. What about weekends where a boy prefers to do couch surfing or playing video games for hours than playing with others? Also about that we could also talk about the harmful effects of sedentary life, but this would take us too long. But I came to its loneliness, obesity, self-esteem issues. There is a culture of waste where everything is disposable: love, friendship, leadership, feelings, food, technologies. And children and youth on one hand and elders on the other are a hindrance. The consequences are broken families, abortion, euthanasia, abandonment of family members, a relativized world where I can choose from 56 different types of gender, just to say one example. A society where you no longer know if a man is a man or a woman, or a man and a woman at the same time, and vice versa. A great crisis of education and values. Where education is undervalued, teachers have no authority over their pupils, and parents prefer that their children play video games or watch TV so they don't disturb. I mentioned some points, maybe not all, which in my opinion are the most important. With them, I mean to affirm that there's still a lot to be done, and sport in this situation is a gift of God through which we can continue to improve our society, and the position of sport pastoral ministry can help a lot to interact between athletes and the school identity, for example. So it won't be just a motto on the wall. While preparing this conference, it came to my mind also a very graphic example of this. You probably remember that in late January in the press was published the story of a Gainesville police officer who was alerted because some kids were playing basketball in the street noisily. I don't know if you have seen the video. And when he arrived, he started to talk with the kids, and instead of punishing them, they tell them to continue playing, and he tell them, I will bring backup tomorrow. And he appears with Shaquille O'Neal, and it's nice because Shaquille O'Neal then asked the kids to continue their studies, and he asked them to repeat that they will be respectful with peers, elders, with their parents. I like very much the video, and I would say that this is an example of how sport can change the lives of the people. The officer attitude reflects an image of authority that educates and not simply punishes or fills paper to fulfill. And this can be extrapolated to coaches. What's the attitude of the coach based on? And so I insist that sport has the ability to change the course of things, to change lives. Although it will be an idea that maybe be repeated during these days, it is interesting that approximately 70% of student Catholic institutions 70% of students of Catholic institutions in the United States play some kind of sport at least once a month. And however, only 25% of them regularly go to Mass on Sundays, and only 10% participate in a Christian life group. Sport can integrate into society groups at risk, such as immigrants, people with less resources, inmates, disabled people. And the Pope has spoken many times about the need to go to the existential peripheries, which often are much closer than we think. I'm not only talking about poor people, I'm talking about broken families, bullying issues at school. All the above points I've mentioned are peripheries, cases where Christians can do a lot, and especially through sport. I can reaffirm sport is a great instrument of evangelization in the 21st century. Based on this, I would like to make a specific appeal for Christian life, to the laity who are here today. The time we are living is the time of the laity for Christian life. We cannot continue to be wagons in this train, but we all should be locomotives, because otherwise we will make it too heavy to pull up all of us. We must grasp our responsibility in a spirit of sacrifice and hope, aware that at all times, Lord sustains us. The laity must become leaven that ferments the surrounding environment. Things can change from home, playing with the children, like Pope Francis likes to say, wasting time with them, with brothers, with nephews. Things change when a group of schools come together to educate pupils in values through sport. Thanks to institutions like Sports Leader or Varsity Catholic and others in universities. When a group of parishes organizes among his faithful a basketball championship, for example, to then share their faith from the moments lived. These situations make it possible that a bishop realizes the need of appointing one of his priests to the pastoral care of sport, or to appoint a person dedicated to sport pastoral ministry in a diocese. But without a real demand, it will be difficult for us to have a long-term project, and the same should happen at the Bishop Conference level. And maybe someone could think, well, I don't mind if the bishop appoints a priest or a person, or the Bishop Conference appoints someone, but I can tell you that these can help in situations like the one we were talking before in the NCAA. For example, I can say that this summer in the Olympics there will be a wonderful Olympic chapel inside the village, because we could work together with the International Olympic Committee, and there will be a consultant of the Pontifical Council for the laity in the inauguration. So let's not blame others when the change begins from ourselves. Yesterday I was talking with Paul about how wonderful is the spirit of entrepreneurship of the Americans. The people in the United States run their business really well. But my question is, how do you run the business of your faith? What about your school? What about the spiritual formation of the students? I'm aware that reversing this situation is not easy, nor it can be achieved within a couple of days. The formation in dioceses, parishes, schools, and universities is essential. And the conference that has brought us here today aims also to be conscious about the importance of the formators. Maybe we are used to expect the bishop to appoint a sport chaplain, the parish priest to launch or organize a sporting activity for youngsters, or the school principal who pays someone to do something. And this should stop. We need to take the initiative. In our work at the Church and Sport section, one of the goals we have is to encourage bishop conferences to appoint a head of sports ministry at the national level, and currently very few of them have already won. Although those where one is appointed, great results are obtained. Let us pray, let us ask our pastor responsibly a good formation also for the laity to convey the message of the gospel through sports. the Holy See strongly believes in the urgent need for Christians to be forth in the ministry of sport. In addition to the daily activity, the Church and Sports section has already made 4 study seminars dedicated to different topics. In 2005, we organized a seminar entitled "The Christian Mission in the Field of Sport Today," and it served as an examination on how the Church, defined by Blaise Paul VI as the expert in humanity, can enter into dialogue with athletes through the natural benefit and joy aroused by sports. In 2007, a new seminar entitled "Sport, an Educational and Pastoral Challenge" focused on the role of chaplains in the world of sports, because the chaplain carries out an essential role in bearing testimony to the greater significance of sports within the wider understanding of the Christian vocation to sanctity. In 2009, we developed a seminar entitled "Sport, Education and Faith Towards a New Season for Catholic Sports Association." And finally, last year, we organized a seminar for coaches entitled "Coaches Educating People." And the seminar was very interesting because although not all teams have a chaplain, all teams certainly have a coach, and the coach is at the front lines of the educational activity. I have brought with me just a few copies of the proceedings of the seminars, so if someone wants them, please ask me, or also you can order them by email. These seminars are very useful to learn about different initiatives worldwide and to focus on ideas and long-term projects. However, I recognize that maybe there are too theoretical. This is partly because the Pontifical Council for the laity cannot go to the merits of every case. It's the mission of the local churches and the bishop conferences to establish pastoral methods that are best suited to each culture, because it's not the same talking about pastoral sports ministry in Cincinnati than in Kinshasa, for example. So I'm going to tell you something. When we organized this international seminar last year about coaches, one person told me, this seminar has been very interesting, but sometimes we need more practical information, like sports leaders and others that talk the last day of the conference, and how to implement Catholic faith in sports. So I would like to tell you not to lose this opportunity you have, because you have these institutions very close to you. You can touch with your hand the results. So I'm convinced that our conference today, it's a great opportunity to form at local and national level, to share experiences, learn new methods of evangelization. I would like to finish by offering some common suggestions to all sports and situations that can be useful for the growth of faith in the sport. First, I would like to tell you to teach athletes to seek God. There's a phrase attributed to Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, the writer of The Little Prince, which says, "If you want to build a ship, don't ramp up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea." So, in my opinion, it's less important to teach the kids or the athletes how to pray than to teach how to find God in the fights and joys of every day. It doesn't mean that it's not important to teach them to pray, but it's important that they can learn how to find God in every situation of their lives. I would like to suggest to involve different pastoral agents in sports, make sport with kids, with people with disabilities, involve parishes. Pope Francis has repeatedly spoken about the aggregative value of sport and the importance of not neglecting parishes and Catholic institutions. make sport a great instrument of apostolate. I remember a priest in my diocese in Madrid who, other than the parish commitments every week, was coaching an amateur basketball team, and organized every Friday a soccer game among the boys of the parish. And he is a very good priest on and off the field. The remarkable thing is that Sunday Mass was filled with guys who played with him. And why? Because the manner he behaved in sport was attractive. He attracts because he gives testimony of coherence and truth. He has devoted his life to the parish. He's given entirely to the apostolate. So I would like to ask you to use sport to bring athletes closer to the sacraments, especially to the sacrament of the confession in this year of mercy. Sacraments are not an invention of the Church. Sometimes we are thinking about new methods, which is very good, but we forget that God gave us these new methods, and it's the source of the grace. In this day, we have talked about games on Sunday. I think that everything done to glorify God is good. It's okay, even if it's on Sunday. I know that sometimes it's difficult to go to Mass, but these athletes, sometimes they wake up at 5 to go to train before school. Then let's ask them to wake up then earlier to go to Mass. And I know that sometimes it's not easy, but also this sport chaplain can help to find a Mass available for these athletes who have a very difficult schedule on Sundays. Also, it's important that the coach to be an example for them. It has to be a witness, and they notice it when you speak about something you don't practice. So I would like to say also not to abandon Christian formation. One of the dangers of Christians today is to forget about spiritual life and concentrate on doing. We cannot turn our mission into social voluntarism without neglecting other initiatives. The Christian gives himself or herself because of a person, which is Jesus Christ. The Holy Father, addressing coaches, said, "You can be a valid formator of young people beside the parents, the teachers, the priests, and the catechists. However, every good formator must receive a solid formation. It's necessary to form the formators. Therefore, it's opportune to appeal to all the organizations that operate in the field of sport, the international and national federations, the lay and the ecclesial sports associations, to give due attention and to invest the necessary resources for the professional, human, and spiritual formation of coaches. How good it would be if in all sports and at all levels, from the great international competitions to the tournaments of the parish oratories, young people found in their coaches authentic witnesses of life and of lived faith." So I would like to ask you, how do you hire coaches? How do you care about their formation in values, in virtues, in faith? I would like to ask you, coaches, how many times your team, your athletes, come to your personal prayer, to your dialogue with God? How well do you know your athletes? They can count on you. Sometimes it's more important to be there for them. It's not so essential to go with them to pray or to tell them to behave in this or that way, but to be with them so they can count on you in a difficult situation. Sometimes the coach becomes a second father for these kids who don't have a father, or they live in a broken family situation. Make sport a form of openness to others, in contrast to the existing individualism. Sport can generate large interactions with other Catholics, Christians, and other faith institutions who share a virtuous approach to sport. St. John Paul II often recalled that ideas are not imposed, are proposed. Divine filiation leads us to see in the other a brother. So it's important not to be self-centered. I was yesterday in Trinity High School in Louisville, and I told them that they are very, very lucky because they had the opportunity to go to a very expensive school, which not everybody can afford that, and their parents spend the money, invest the money in their formation when they have other possibilities to do with that money. They could have a better car, a bigger house, but they decide to invest this money in their formation. So they have to be very grateful for what they have. Please tell this to your athletes also. They are very lucky. And also, I would like to ask them about the mission that God has for them. Why God put me in this place, in this team. At last, I would like to say, don't forget the most important thing is to win. Yes, to win eternal life. Like St. Paul said, I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. So what matters is not who won or lost, but rather how he or she played the game. A coach should sanctify him or herself, doing the best, but not with an attitude of win at all costs. It's important also, talking about virtues, to let the athletes understand that the practice of sport is that its ethical basis is no less universal than its distinctive concepts and skills. When a person enters the practice of sport, he or she becomes obligated to its inherent moral demands, no less than he or she becomes committed to an understanding and practice of its characteristics of concepts and physical skills. It's not something Catholic that we put on sports. It's not something you could and paste in a training. It's the training itself. I would like to end my speech hoping that these moments we are living together will be useful to learn to love more sports, to respect and to ensure respect, and above all, to offer it to God as a desire to do everything for Him. With St. Paul, we say, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do everything for the glory of God. And I would add, whether you run a race or score a goal, do everything for the glory of God. Thank you. I'm sorry again for my English and for read all my speech, but it wasn't easy. I'm open for any question if you want. I'm also open to suggestions you would like to do in order to help us to help you from the Holy See, from the Church and Sports section, if you think that we could do something from the Vatican about sports. It would be a pleasure to hear from you.
Dr. Santiago, you mentioned that the Church and Sports section is studying specific issues related to sport. I was curious what perhaps one or two issues seem to be rising to importance right now in the universal church.
Well, one of those is obviously the problem of education. That's why we organize this seminar about coaches, because we see that the coach spends very often more time than the parents or teachers with youngsters. So the Holy Father is concerned about the education of the new generations, and so I would say that one of these points is this one. The other, I could say also about the problem of the how sport has become something externalized. I mean, has lost its meaning, its true meaning. Now, sport, to say American football, if you see Super Bowl, I'm not saying it's something bad, but we need to understand correctly what's happening. It becomes a business matter, not a sport. And you see that nowadays athletes are thinking more about earning money than to play, or they are thinking about playing, being the best to earn more money, or to have a better contract, or I don't know. And there's also this ethical point of view about sport regarding the use of drugs, which is something that also Pope Francis is concerned about. It's not possible to play to win at all costs, and he repeated in more than one occasion about this. We were talking before during dinner about this, and about right now you cannot see sport like a game if you don't go to school. Even sometimes, even in high school, it's not anymore a game. It becomes something else, but a game. And then when it becomes something like that, you risk. I don't say that this is going to happen, but you risk that people is thinking only on training and not on have fun playing, or use drugs to be stronger or to be faster. So I would say that these are three of these points we are studying about. I can say that we are working on a document about the ethical and philosophical points on sports. And we are working with different people, with theologians, with athletes, with coaches, with different people about this document. And I think we would like to be this document as an ABC for a approach sports in a good way.
Dr. Santiago, you mentioned some statistics about how maybe 75 or 8% of youth are involved in sports, and maybe 25%, only 25% will be attending mass. There are some rules that we have in our archdiocese about not having youth sporting events on Sunday mornings. I wonder, and maybe there's some relationship about the importance of sports versus mass, and what role our church leaders have in promoting the importance of mass. I heard you make some comments about trying to find time. I'd like you to expand on that a little bit, and what role our church leaders might have in developing the importance of the mass.
Well, I'm the first. I try to go to Mass daily, so I'm not the one who's going to say that it's not important to go to Mass on Sunday. But I think it's not something impossible to do both things. If it's impossible, I prefer that a Christian should choose to go to Mass that rather to go to a game. But I insist, I think it can be complementary. You can celebrate Mass with the team, for example, at first time in the morning or at the end of the game. Many of you come from schools. I guess you have a school chaplain. Maybe the solution is asking the school chaplain to celebrate Mass for the teams. For example, I could say in Europe, in Spain, in my diocese, we have Mass at 9 p.m. I know it's a different culture. We go late, we go to bed later, and so. But there's always a possibility for us to go to Mass on Sunday, even if you have all your day full of appointments on sport matters. So maybe a possibility is to offer the athletes the possibility to go to Mass early in the morning or late in the evening, because we've heard that competition is something which is good. And I'm not saying that we cannot doing this or the other, but what I'm saying is that we need to find a solution that can offer both things, because sport, as I said, is something that pleases to God, and on the other hand, Christians have to go to Mass, not because it's an obligation, but because he or she really wants to go, because he desires to adore our Lord, to give Him thanks, to ask Him and for forgiveness, and to ask Him things for him, for her, for her family. So I think it's not impossible to combine both things. But when we see these problems, we need to look further and to look for solutions, which in some cases could be possible, and in some cases won't be possible. But then, if it's really not possible, then I would say first is your commitment to God. But I think in the majority of cases, is it possible?
Can I have one
Sure.
quick follow-up question? Sometimes when you have a larger family, if you have a lot of different sporting events or other events on Sunday, then Sunday becomes just like any other day of the week that you're all separated, hectic.
and sports on Sundays, it's a problem because of that, because Sunday normally is the day where family stays together and where you can see the rest of the family. But I cannot give the solution. I mean, each family has to find the balance and to see if it's possible for them or if it's not possible. I mean, and also I think it's a great sacrifice to offer God about not going to the game because you have to go to Mass. I mean, I'm talking about different situations, and we need to. What I want to say is that we, as coaches, principals, sports director for sports ministry, we need to try to help people to live their faith, and at the same time to be able to practice sport, which is not always easy. But like many other situations, there's people who works a lot of hours a day and they cannot go to Mass, or I don't know. I have no idea. I have no the solution for the problem. But what I'm saying is we need to try to help people to live their faith as better as possible.
Santiago, in terms of the council and the issues that are considered, is the issue of co-ed sports ever come up? One of the things that's in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania bishops set a policy this past year forbidding boys to compete against girls in wrestling and in tackle rugby and in football, out of concern for, and particularly for the issue of wrestling, out of concern for the virtue of modesty and also respect toward the opposite sex. Any comment you could offer on that would be appreciated.
Well, I don't know the specific issue. I can say that we haven't touched this issue in the Pontifical Council for the laity because rarely happens. I mean, and even more in wrestling, I say that it's a difficult position for a boy or even a girl about modesty, and I mean, I insist I don't have I don't have the dates about the information about this situation, but I would have to learn about it a little bit to give you a comment because, as I said, we haven't approached this problem before, at least in my term while I've been in the church and sports section.
Do you have a comment on boxing or mixed martial arts where the intent of the sport is to physically harm your opponent and how that kind of fits in? Because I personally have a really hard time reconciling that with the Catholic view, especially as we're talking about upholding dignity and things like that of our contemporaries.
Mm-hmm. Me personally, I have an opinion, but as head of the church and sports section, I don't know if I'm allowed to say. I'm talking personally. For me, a sport affects the dignity of the human body. it's difficult. For example, for not talk about boxing, or I would like to put an example with parachuting. Parachuting, it's a safe sport, but there's a risk in itself. Is it ethical to practice parachuting? I would say it's not a sin to practice parachuting, but a person has to consider, for example, the risk he's taking on practicing this sport. It's not the same, in my opinion, it's not the same if you have a family and you are jumping, or if you are single. It's not the same if you are risking your life because you are being imprudent while you are doing parachuting, or you are doing it consciously. So I think it's difficult because on one side you can say, well, nobody's dying because of boxing, or normally people don't die because they practice parachuting, but you put in risk your life sometimes. So I don't have the answer, and my opinion is that it depends on the situation of each person. And there's some specialties that I even have doubts about if they are sports. So, but I insist, this is my personal opinion, not as Santiago, not as the head of the church and sports section.
In terms of developing and respecting the human person, what can the USA learn from Europe, and what can Europe learn from the USA?
Difficult question. I think not only in respecting the human body, Europe can learn a lot about sports in the United States. I would say that there's much respect here than in Europe when someone practices sport. What I've seen. As there are more specialties practiced in schools here, you have hockey, you have basketball, tennis, soccer, American football. There's a lot of different sports. In Europe, there's mainly soccer, there's basketball, volleyball, for example, as well. But if it's not, in public schools, you won't see many different sports. It's mainly soccer and basketball. And the different, in my opinion, different specialities gives you a wider vision of respect, because you know better the rules of different sports, and also because in Europe what is most known is soccer, and as I said, it turned to be a business, and there's these hooligans and the business under the table. So I could say that in the United States we can learn from you about respect more the opponent. What can be learned from the US, from Europe? I don't know. I'm trying to think, but maybe it's the only thing. I see that here there is a lot of professionalism, and in Europe and other countries, as there is less professionalism, there's still more the spirit of the game. You could see people on the streets, kids playing on the streets, and it's also happening here in the US, but I would say that in some countries they still have this sense of the game when they practice the sport. So, but nowadays with the globalization, it's very difficult to make a difference between American sport and European sport in levels of ethics, because it's more or less the same. So. Well, thank you. I insist I'm at your service. I will be here until Friday evening, so even after or tomorrow, if you have any question or if I can be in any way helpful, I will be very happy to be with you. Thank you very much.